2147, humanity sent its entire fleet to face the mighty Krix Empire. The aliens took one look at our small, primitive ships and laughed. They mocked us. They humiliated us. They prepared to wipe us out for sport. But as our fleet was being torn apart, something massive awakened in the darkness. Something that would make the entire galaxy regret ever underestimating humanity. Before we dive deeper into the story, please subscribe. It costs you nothing, but helps stellar HFY a lot. In the year 2147, humanity reached out to the stars with hope. What we found was the Krix Empire, an ancient civilization that had conquered 1,000 worlds. They called us primitives. They called our ships scrap metal held together by hope. And on the edge of the Orion Arm, at the Battle of Proxima Vale, they laughed. Inside the massive alien command sphere with glowing crystalline walls, Overlord Vexthal stood tall. His chitinous armor gleamed as holographic displays floated around him. Look at them. These hairless apes dare challenge us with this. 200 ships. Their largest vessel is barely a frigate by our standards. Open a channel. Let the inferior species hear how they will die. The human fleet appeared on screen, sleek but small carriers, destroyers, and cruisers. On the bridge of the UNS Vanguard, Captain Alina Reyes stood with steel in her eyes. All ships hold formation. Do not fire first. We're here to show them we belong in this galaxy. Her XO, Commander Marcus Hale, replied with tension in his voice. Captain, they're laughing. Actual recorded laughter on open channels. The Krix fleet stretched across the void like a storm of silver blades. Thousands of elegant, razor-sharp vessels shimmered with powerful energy shields. Their flagship alone dwarfed the entire human armada. Vexthal laughed loudly. Humans, your species still fights with chemical rockets and metal bullets in some corners of your world. You bring toys to a war of gods. Surrender now, and we may let your children serve as laborers. Tension grew thick across human ships. Pilots sat in cockpits with white knuckles. Soldiers checked weapons in barracks. Families back on Earth watched live feeds in silence, hearts pounding. The laughter spread across every Krix ship. Billions of citizens across their empire tuned in for the spectacle. Humanity's first interstellar fleet looked like a child's drawing next to the mighty Krix armada. But Captain Reyes clenched her jaw and gave the order that would change everything. All ships advance, shields to maximum. Let them laugh. We'll give them something else to choke on. The first volley from the Krix was devastating. Beams of pure antimatter lanced across the darkness. Human shields flared and buckled under the assault. The destroyer Beijing vanished in a silent fireball. Pilot screams echoed over comms. We're losing port batteries. Hull breach on Deck 3. Yet the human fleet didn't break. They weaved skillfully, using every asteroid and debris field for cover. Their missiles, old chemical rockets upgraded with experimental warp tips, actually slipped through some Krix point defenses. Vexthal remained amused. Cute, they have spirit. Focus fire on their flagship, end this farce. The Vanguard took hit after hit. Alarms blared across the ship. Fires raged in corridors. Captain Reyes stood tall on her burning bridge. Damage report, she said, voice steady. We've lost 37 ships already. They're toying with us, Captain, Hale replied. The Krix laughed louder. Their commentators called it the most pathetic invasion in 10 millennia. But deep in the human formation, something stirred. Classified beacons began pulsing silent signals into deep space, a signal no one in the fleet was supposed to know about. A young comms officer on the Vanguard spoke with a trembling voice. Captain, we just received confirmation. Project Erebus is active. Reyes gave a small, dangerous smile. Good, keep them laughing. Another human cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Alien laughter echoed across the battlefield as the battle grew fiercer. Human ships dodged and fought with everything they had, but the Krix armada seemed endless. Every second bought precious time, yet the cost in lives climbed higher. Reyes watched the tactical display with burning eyes. She knew her fleet was outnumbered and outgunned, but she also knew something the Krix did not. Hidden in the shadows of the solar system and beyond lay a final hope. A secret project years in the making. A vessel built not just for war, but for survival. The Krix continued their bombardment. More human ships flared and died in the cold vacuum. But the beacons kept sending their message. Far away, something massive began to stir. The Overlord's laughter filled the channels once again, full of arrogance and confidence. He believed this would be a quick victory, a show for his empire. He had no idea that humanity had prepared for this exact moment of desperation. Captain Reyes stood firm as explosions rocked her ship. "Hold the line," she ordered. "We are not dying today." The battle raged on with growing intensity. Human ingenuity met alien might in a deadly dance. For now, the Krix still laughed, completely unaware of what was coming. The Krix had no idea what humanity had been hiding. The Krix expected a swift and total slaughter. What they received instead was the first real surprise they had faced in centuries. Human fighters, small and agile stingrays, launched from the remaining carriers and swarmed forward like angry hornets. Their pilots were the best Earth had ever produced, veterans of the brutal resource wars, now augmented with neural links that allowed them to think and react at near-light speed during combat. Lieutenant Jamal Torres gripped his controls tightly. "All right, Wolves, Fox 3, eat this, you crystal bastards." His missiles curved impossibly through space, using miniature warp bubbles to bypass the advanced Krix shields. 3 enemy interceptors disintegrated in brilliant flashes of light. Vexthal watched from his command sphere, his amusement starting to fade. Interesting, their technology is crude but inventive. Increase firepower by 30%, crush them. The Krix responded with overwhelming force. Gravity lances tore through the human formations, ripping ships apart with terrifying ease. Hundreds of human lives were lost in mere minutes. On the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Alina Reyes watched helplessly as her fleet shrank on the tactical display, each blinking icon a painful reminder of the heavy cost. Yet the humans adapted faster than the aliens could calculate. They unleashed nuclear-pumped X-ray lasers in desperate close-range broadsides. Damaged ships were deliberately rammed into Krix cruisers as final acts of defiance. The sheer ferocity caught the enemy off guard. One Marine sergeant, leading a boarding action on a damaged Krix frigate, shouted over comms with raw fury. "If I'm dying today, I'm taking these squid-faced bastards with me." The boarding parties performed better than anyone expected. Human power armor and rapid-fire railguns shredded Krix warriors in brutal close-quarters combat. The aliens, who preferred fighting from a safe distance with superior technology, recoiled in genuine shock at the raw savagery of human soldiers. For every 10 human ships destroyed, the Krix lost one. It should have been nothing to them. But the laughter on their communication channels began to fade, slowly replaced by irritated clicks and growing concern. Vexthal demanded answers. How are these primitives adapting so quickly? Run a full genetic and cultural analysis. I want to know what makes them persistent. Back on Earth, billions watched the battle in a mix of horror and fierce pride. World leaders made quiet, urgent calls. Hidden shipyards across the solar system received a single one-word order: now. On the battered bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Reyes bled from a deep head wound but refused to sit down. She addressed the entire remaining fleet with a voice full of fire. "They think we're inferior. Show them what inferior looks like when it refuses to die. Every second we hold buys Earth another day. Fight like hell." The surviving human ships formed a desperate spearhead, driving straight toward the center of the Krix formation. Suicide runs became common. Heroic last stands played out in real time. The carrier named Hope's last light charged forward and self-destructed inside a Krix battleship's shield envelope, cracking its massive hull wide open in a spectacular explosion. Vexthal was now clearly irritated. Enough entertainment, annihilate them. A new wave of Krix reinforcements arrived, true capital ships, enormous vessels the size of small moons. The human fleet was reduced to just 93 ships. Smoke filled every bridge and corridor. Captain Reyes stared into the void, her face illuminated by flashing red warning lights. Yet deep in the formation, the classified quantum beacons continued their silent work. They finally received a reply. A young comms officer whispered in complete awe, "Captain, something just dropped out of warp at the edge of the system. It's massive, bigger than anything I've ever seen." Reyes leaned forward sharply. "Identify it immediately." The answer that came back sent a wave of mixed terror and impossible hope through every human heart still fighting in that deadly battlefield. The massive signature grew stronger on every scanner. Whatever it was moving closer, accelerating in ways that defied normal physics. Space itself seemed to shift around its hidden form. The Krix fleet noticed the newcomer as well, but Vexthal still believed it was just another desperate trick from the primitives. Human pilots continued their desperate dogfights, buying every possible second. More ships exploded around the vanguard as the Krix pressed their advantage. Fires raged unchecked in multiple sections. Crew members fought bravely even as systems failed one after another. Reyes gripped the edge of her command console, blood dripping down her face. She knew her people were giving everything they had. The beacons had done their job. Help was coming. The only question was whether it would arrive in time. The Krix armada closed in for what they believed would be the final blow. Their laughter had almost completely died, replaced by cold calculation and growing irritation. They had no idea that the real battle was only just beginning. The massive object continued its approach from the darkness, its true scale still hidden, but its presence impossible to ignore. It wasn't one of ours, or was it? The Krix brought their full might to bear. Humanity's fleet, already battered and bleeding, began to die in earnest. Wave after wave of fresh Krix reinforcements poured into the system. Their laughter had returned, but it was colder now, sharper, filled with cruel satisfaction. Overlord Vexthal broadcast his message on every human frequency so that every surviving crew member could hear their coming doom. Your defiance is noted. Your extinction will be recorded for educational purposes across the Empire. Human losses mounted horrifically. The Vanguard limped forward with half her systems offline. Entire sections of the ship were open to vacuum. Captain Alina Reyes lost friends with every new damage report. A young ensign sacrificed himself to save the bridge crew from a collapsing bulkhead. A father of 3 piloted his damaged fighter straight into an enemy reactor, taking out a Krix cruiser in his final act. Yet the humans refused to break. They fought with everything they had left, using every dirty trick in the book. They deployed EMP mines that crippled Krix targeting systems. They hacked enemy drones and turned them against their former masters. Old chemical explosives, delivered by desperate drone swarms, created chaos in the heart of the alien formations. During one successful boarding action on a captured Krix frigate, a human team made a chilling discovery. They accessed the enemy's tactical logs and found detailed plans to glass Earth for sport after the battle was won. Marine Captain Sofia Ramirez, voice shaking with pure fury over the comms, shouted, "These things don't see us as people. They see us as vermin to be exterminated." That horrifying knowledge spread like wildfire through the remaining human ships. It fueled a deep, burning rage that even the Krix found terrifying. The aliens had expected fear and surrender. Instead, they faced cornered predators fighting with nothing left to lose. Vexthal, now visibly concerned, studied the incoming data. Their aggression metrics are off the charts. These humans fight like cornered apex predators despite their inferior technology. Deploy the harvesters. The harvesters emerged from the rear of the Krix fleet, nightmare biomechanical vessels with long, writhing tendrils. These living ships latched onto damaged human vessels and began literally eating them, breaking them down and converting the wreckage into fresh Krix combat drones. The sight was horrifying. The human fleet was reduced to just 41 ships. Hope was dying with every passing minute. Smoke filled the corridors of the Vanguard. Systems were failing one by one. Captain Reyes stood on her damaged bridge, her voice breaking for the first time as she addressed the few ships still fighting beside her. This is Captain Ray's to all remaining vessels. If we fall here, make sure Earth knows we died standing. Fight like hell. The desperate battle continued. Human ships used the last of their ammunition in close-range volleys. Pilots flew until their fighters fell apart around them. Marines fought hand-to-hand in boarding actions even as their own ships were being consumed by the harvesters. Then the massive signature reappeared on scanners, much closer this time. Warning alarms screamed across every bridge. The science officer stared at his display in disbelief. It's using gravitational lensing to hide its true size. My God, the power readings are impossible. Vexthal, trying to regain his earlier smugness, broadcast once more. Another pathetic trick from the primitives. Bring it forward. We will devour it too. The mysterious object began to move. Slowly at first, then accelerating at rates that completely defied known physics. Space itself seemed to ripple and bend around its enormous hidden bulk. The closer it came, the more the battlefield seemed to shift. Every remaining human ship watched the approaching giant with a mixture of awe and desperate hope. They had given everything. They had held the line far longer than anyone expected. Now something was answering their call. The Crick's fleet noticed the newcomer as well. Their formations began to adjust, redirecting firepower toward the new threat. Vexthal's confidence had returned, but a small undercurrent of unease had crept into his voice. The massive object continued its steady advance through the chaos of battle. Debris from destroyed ships drifted past its unseen hull. The scale of it was becoming harder to hide. Even the Crick's sensors were struggling to fully analyze what they were facing. Ray's gripped the command rail tightly, her knuckles white. Blood still stained her uniform from earlier hits. She whispered under her breath, "Come on, whatever you are, we can't hold much longer." Explosions continued to light up the darkness. Another human destroyer vanished in a fireball. The harvesters grew bolder, wrapping their tendrils around more ships. The Cricks pressed their advantage, believing the end was near. But the massive signature kept growing stronger. Its acceleration increased. The very fabric of space seemed to react to its presence. Whatever humanity had kept hidden for so long was finally arriving at the moment of greatest need. The Cricks finally stopped laughing when they realized what was coming straight at them. The mothership was waking up. The remaining human ships formed a final, ragged defensive sphere around the vanguard. What was left of the once proud fleet was now reduced to barely 30 vessels. The crews were exhausted beyond measure, many wounded, running dangerously low on ammunition, and clinging to the last threads of hope. Crick's forces closed in for the kill from every direction. Overlord Vexthal savored the moment from his command sphere, his mandibles clicking with dark pleasure as he watched the pathetic remnants of the human resistance. "Record this moment in full detail," Vexthal ordered. "This will be the day the primitive species finally learned its rightful place beneath the Crick's empire." Boarding parties slammed into the vanguard like a tidal wave. Alien shock troops teleported directly into corridors and hangars. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted across multiple decks. The sounds of railgun fire, screams, and exploding grenades echoed through the ship. Captain Alina Reyes grabbed a rifle from a fallen Marine and stood shoulder to shoulder with her crew, firing burst after burst at the invading Crick's warriors. "Not one step back," Reyes screamed over the gunfire, her voice raw with fury. "This is our ship, fight for every inch." The battle inside the vanguard was pure chaos. Marines in battered power armor clashed with towering Crick soldiers in tight hallways. Blood from both species stained the decks. Reyes took cover behind a bulkhead, reloaded with shaking hands, and kept firing. She had already lost count of how many friends had fallen around her. Sacrifices became legendary in real time across the fleet. The destroyer Sydney, engines failing and hull breached in a dozen places, turned directly into the path of an incoming harvester. The captain's final transmission was calm and resolute as the ship accelerated. The collision bought the rest of the fleet precious minutes as the biomechanical monster reeled from the explosion. Fighter pilots continued flying even after their ships began breaking apart, guiding their dying craft into enemy formations for one last strike. The massive signature that had been approaching was now clearly visible on every scanner. It was a colossal vessel, black as the deepest night, covered in what looked like ancient human runes mixed with technology that seemed almost alien in its sophistication. It dwarfed everything on the battlefield. Even the largest Crick's capital ships looked small beside its impossible scale. Vexthal finally sounded uneasy as he stared at the incoming readings. "What is that? All weapons target the newcomer immediately. Do not let it interfere." The entire Crick's fleet began redirecting fire toward the massive new arrival. Thousands of energy beams and gravity lances lashed out across the void. Yet the colossal ship did not fire back. It simply kept advancing. Space itself seemed to bend and ripple around its enormous hull, as if reality struggled to contain its presence. Inside the giant vessel, systems long dormant began to awaken. Lights flickered on across kilometers of corridors. Massive weapon batteries hummed with power. In the central command chamber, a single figure stood watching the carnage on holographic displays. Admiral Jonas Kane, a living legend many believed had retired or died years ago, finally broke his long silence. His voice carried calm, ancient authority as it transmitted across the battlefield. "This is the UNS Prometheus, humanity's last insurance policy. Captain Reyes, you've done well. Now stand clear." The words sent a shockwave through every surviving human. On the Vanguard bridge, Reyes lowered her rifle for a brief moment, tears mixing with the blood on her face. The rest of her crew stared in stunned silence as the realization hit them. Their final hope had arrived. The Prometheus continued its steady advance through the debris field of destroyed ships. It moved with a grace that should have been impossible for something so enormous. Crick's attacks splashed harmlessly against its advanced shielding, barely registering as threats. Vexthal's irritation quickly turned to alarm. "Focus all fire on that monstrosity. Bring it down before it can fully activate." Hundreds of Crick's ships swarmed toward the Prometheus like insects attacking a mountain. Harvesters extended their tendrils toward it, desperate to consume this new threat. The human fleet, though nearly broken, felt a surge of renewed strength. Pilots who moments ago had accepted death now fought with fresh determination, knowing their sacrifice might actually mean something. Reyes wiped blood from her eyes and keyed her comms. "All remaining ships, form up behind the Prometheus. Give it whatever cover we still can." Explosions continued to bloom across the battlefield. The Vanguard shook violently as more boarding parties pushed deeper into the ship. Crew members fought with whatever they could find: rifles, broken pipes, even their bare hands. The situation inside the flagship was desperate, but the arrival of the Prometheus had changed everything. Admiral Kane's voice came through once more, steady and reassuring. "Hold on, Captain. We are here now." The sleeping giant had awakened. For 30 long years, Project Erebus had remained humanity's greatest and most closely guarded secret. While the world focused on building smaller warships and defending known space, vast hidden shipyards poured every available resource into a single, unimaginable vessel. The Prometheus was designed not merely to fight, but to terrify any enemy that dared threaten Earth. The massive ship finally revealed its full glory as it emerged from its stealth fields. 40 kilometers long, it dwarfed every other vessel on the battlefield. Its hull featured multiple layers of armor forged from collapsed stellar matter, giving it strength that defied conventional physics. Strange weapons arrays glowed with contained power along its surface, ready to bend reality itself. It moved like a silent predator, stalking its prey. The Prometheus wasted no time. Its first attack was not a simple energy beam. Instead, it launched a directed singularity, a controlled miniature black hole, straight into the heart of the Crick's formation. The devastating weapon tore through space with horrifying power. 3 massive moon-sized Crick's battleships were instantly crushed and consumed, their structures collapsing inward with sickening finality before disappearing forever. Chaos erupted across the Crick's fleet. Vexthal's voice cracked with sudden panic as he shouted orders. "Impossible! This cannot be! Full retreat! All fleets converge on that abomination immediately. destroy it at all costs. Thousands of Krix ships turned their weapons toward the Prometheus and swarmed forward like a furious metallic cloud. They fired everything they had: antimatter beams, gravity lances, and swarms of missiles. The sheer volume of fire should have been enough to vaporize anything in existence. Yet against the Prometheus, it was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. The colossal ship's shields absorbed the attacks with barely a flicker, its advanced systems shrugging off the assault as if it were nothing. What remained of the human fighters cheered wildly as they flew escort for their savior. Exhausted pilots, many flying on emergency power, formed up around the giant vessel and added their own fire to the fight. On the heavily damaged bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Alina Reyes watched the Prometheus dominate the battlefield with tears streaming down her bloodied face. "I knew we weren't alone," she whispered, her voice filled with raw emotion. "I knew it." The Prometheus answered the Krix aggression with overwhelming force. It deployed thousands of advanced drone swarms that quickly outnumbered the entire remaining Krix fleet. These drones moved with perfect coordination, tearing through enemy formations and picking off targets with surgical precision. Then the ship's main cannon, known as the Godspear, began to charge. A terrifying lance of plasma hotter than the core of a star fired across the void. Entire Krix battle groups vanished instantly in blinding flashes of light, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of gas and debris behind. Admiral Jonas Kane's voice boomed across the battlefield, cold and filled with ancient authority. "You laughed at our children's fleet. You mocked our efforts and called us inferior. Now face their father." The Prometheus continued its relentless advance. It moved through the Krix armada like a force of nature, destroying anything that stood in its path. Its secondary weapons systems activated, firing relativistic railgun slugs that punched through enemy hulls at a significant fraction of light speed. Gravity wells were projected to trap escaping ships, and reality-bending pulse waves scrambled Krix targeting computers. Vexthal's flagship, the largest and most heavily armed vessel in the Krix Empire, attempted to escape. Its warp drives spun up in desperation, creating a shimmering distortion in space as it tried to flee the slaughter. But the Prometheus was prepared. It projected a massive gravity well that locked onto the flagship and dragged it back into the fight against its will. The Overlord's ship shuddered violently as powerful forces held it in place. Inside the Prometheus, Admiral Kane stood motionless, watching every detail with calm intensity. Decades of preparation had led to this single moment. Every sacrifice, every secret resource allocation, and every hidden advancement had been for this exact battle. On the Vanguard, Reyes and her surviving crew watched in stunned silence as the tide of the battle completely reversed. What had been a desperate last stand was transforming into a decisive victory. Human pilots who had accepted their deaths now fought with renewed purpose, protected by the shadow of their mighty guardian. The Krix fleet, once so arrogant and confident, was now breaking apart. Ships that had been laughing at humanity moments ago were now fleeing in terror or being systematically dismantled. The Prometheus showed no mercy, pressing its advantage with calculated precision. Vexthal could only watch in horror as his once invincible armada crumbled before the might of a single human vessel. His empire's greatest fleet was being dismantled in front of billions of viewers across the galaxy. The Prometheus pressed forward, its weapons systems firing continuously. The counterattack had begun in full force, and nothing the Krix threw at it seemed capable of slowing its wrath. The counterattack had begun. The Krix Empire, which had never known true fear in 10,000 years of conquest, learned it that day in the most brutal way possible. The Prometheus carved through the enemy armada like a hot knife through butter. The 40-kilometer behemoth moved with unstoppable purpose, its weapons systems unleashing devastation that the Krix had never imagined possible from a single vessel. Its technology was decades ahead of anything the galaxy had seen, reverse-engineered from ancient alien ruins, combined with humanity's relentless ingenuity, pushed to its absolute limit. Advanced AI systems learned and adapted faster than the Krix could change tactics. Relativistic railguns fired slugs at significant fractions of light speed, punching clean through the toughest enemy armor. Rumors even spoke of experimental psionic amplifiers that induced pure terror directly into alien minds. Vexthal's command sphere, once the proud heart of the Crick's fleet, cracked open under sustained fire. Multiple breaches ripped through its crystalline structure as the Prometheus focused its attention on the flagship. The Overlord stumbled as emergency lights flashed and gravity fluctuated wildly around him. In a final desperate broadcast, his voice shook with disbelief and terror. "What are you?" Admiral Jonas Kane's reply was calm, cold, and carried the weight of humanity's entire history. "We are humanity, and we are done being underestimated." The remaining Crick's fleet broke apart in total disarray. Ships that had arrived with arrogant confidence now fled in panic, scattering in every direction. Many did not make it. The Prometheus allowed a portion of the enemy force to escape, not out of mercy, but as a deliberate message to the rest of the Crick's empire. The survivors would carry the story of this day back to their core worlds. On the heavily damaged bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Alina Reyes and her surviving crew watched in stunned silence. The tactical display that had shown certain defeat moments ago now glowed with overwhelming victory. Reyes lowered her rifle, her body trembling from exhaustion and emotion as tears cut clean lines through the blood and grime on her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." The Prometheus continued its dominance, systematically neutralizing the last pockets of resistance. Its drone swarms hunted down fleeing vessels while its massive Godspear cannon fired with precision, erasing entire enemy squadrons in single shots. The battlefield, once filled with Crick's laughter and human screams, now echoed only with the sounds of a retreating enemy and the quiet cheers of exhausted human pilots. Back on Earth, the scenes were unforgettable. Billions of people poured into the streets in celebration. Cities that had watched the battle in fearful silence now erupted with joy, tears, and national anthems. Huge holographic displays showed the Prometheus standing victorious among the wreckage of the Crick's armada. At the same time, quiet memorials began forming for the fallen. Families gathered to honor the thousands of brave souls who had given their lives in the desperate first stages of the battle. Names were read aloud. Children were told stories of heroes like Lieutenant Jamal Torres and Marine Captain Sofia Ramirez. The Prometheus slowly took position as Earth's new guardian. Its enormous silhouette became visible even from the surface during certain orbital passes, a constant reminder that humanity would never again be helpless. New fleet construction began immediately in hidden shipyards. Plans for expansion across the solar system and beyond were accelerated. The age of humanity hiding in fear was officially over. Admiral Jonas Kane made one final broadcast, transmitted not just to the Cricks, but to every species watching across the galaxy. "To every species listening, we come in peace to those who offer it, but we will never again come weak. Humanity stands ready. We have earned our place among the stars." The message spread like wildfire through known space. Civilizations that had once ignored or mocked humanity now took notice. Some reached out with offers of alliance. Others watched warily, understanding that a new power had awakened. Captain Reyes stood on what remained of the Vanguard's bridge, looking out at the Prometheus through the viewport. The massive ship dominated the view, its runes and advanced technology glowing softly. She thought of all the friends and comrades lost in the battle. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. They had bought the time needed for this moment. The Battle of Proxima Vale ended not with humanity's defeat, but with the birth of a new galactic power. The Crick's empire, once unchallenged, would never laugh at humanity again. From this day forward, they would tremble at the mere mention of Earth's name. The stars no longer belonged only to the old empires. They now belonged to those brave enough to claim them through blood, courage, and unbreakable will. They laughed at our inferior fleet until our mothership arrived, and the galaxy was never the same. Subscribe.